Today in Springfield, a protest held outside of the federal building on Main Street is calling on lawmakers to reassess the future of Social Security. Western Mass News reporter Madison Lisowski was at that rally and has the details.
Hands off our Social Security is the motto of the day for protesters on Main Street in Springfield. Senior and disabled residents sharing with Western Mass News that they are worried that an already broken Social Security system will continue to crumble if not addressed.
I'm a senior who's dependent on Social Security, and although I'm privileged to have other sources of retirement income, this is really important to me to protect people now and in the future.
Their frustrations are surrounding DOGE cuts to Social Security, the modernization to online systems, and the threat of telephone services being cut off, which was supposed to go into effect next Monday, but has since been reneged. And there are concerns that Social Security and Medicaid, which provide health care to more than 20% of Americans, could be impacted amidst a congressional budget negotiation. While Republican leaders say they don't want to eliminate it, they do intend to refine it, which protesters are asking them not to do. The goal of the hands-off rally today is to send a message to both federal and state lawmakers that residents are concerned about the future of their Social Security. Arlene Kirsch, an organizer of the rally and a leader of Indivisible Northampton Swing Left Western Mass, tells Western Mass News that gathering together and speaking out is the most effective way to send a message to government leaders.
I really hope that people understand that pushing back on the system is the only thing that works. And if we don't push back, we certainly will not get any gains for the kinds of things that we want.
But Kirsch says that no matter who you voted for, Social Security impacts a wide range of people and should not face additional cuts.
This is not a red state issue or a blue state issue or a purple state issue. This is about right and wrong.
Reporting in Springfield, Madison Lisowski for Western Mass News.